My brothers and sisters, what is going on? It's your man, Pastor Gregory Devon. I am here again. Sanctuary Podcast coming at you with another hot episode. I've got my boy, everybody's favorite friend, on with me today, Mr. JB Jarrod Boggarty on. What's up, brother?
How you doing, sir? How are you today? Good to see
Man,
you.
I cannot complain. Always a pleasure to see you as well, my friend.
Yes,
But
indeed.
I had to have you back. I had to have you back because you are a regular here on the Sanctuary Podcast, and your perspective is such an insightful one that I knew that coming back to this conversation about men, I had to have you back, man.
I
You
appreciate it.
know, yes, sir, absolutely. I know that we get a bad rep sometime, man. Uh,
Yes, indeed, we
they
do.
say sometimes that we don't love, we're not sensitive, we don't know how to act as old school men used to act, but I disagree with all of these things. And today, I want us to discuss when a man loves a woman. When a man loves a woman. And I want us to dialogue about this and kind of dispel certain myths about the way men love and just how men love. And hopefully somebody will walk away from this conversation with a better understanding about men. Let's start with a word of prayer. God, we thank you for this time of being able to fellowship here as gentlemen. We ask you would be in the midst of our conversation, that God enlightenment will go forth. But in all things, you'll be pleased in all that we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Let's hop into this conversation, man, because I just believe that you got something to say, brother. Now, let me ask you this, JB. When it comes to a man's love, if you just had to describe it like in a paragraph, what would you say about a man's love?
If I had to describe a man's love, it would be like fire. Okay.
Mm,
When you first get started, it's an ember.
mm,
It flickers. It's fleeting. And the more that you pour onto it, the greater that it gets. You know.
mhm.
And here's the thing: the more you pour into a man, the more he wants to do for you. You know.
Yes, sir.
And I think a lot of times what people miss out on is where they don't feed the fire. You know, you ever notice
Mhm.
how people get in relationships and they just say they want to rekindle the flame?
Yes,
They
sir.
want to rekindle the fire back. Basically,
Mhm.
that means that they let the fire die out. That's the reason
Mhm.
why I keep this candle going on in the background because
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure I keep the flame going. You see what I'm saying? So
I like that.
that's one of the things that people understand is a man's love is like fire. It keeps you warm. It lights the way. It's a guiding light. It's a warmth. It's also
Mhm.
protection as well, wielded in the right hand. So if I had to describe a man's love, it would definitely be fire.
I love that. I love that. Moses had a bush on fire.
Yes, he did.
I love that. And I would have to agree with you, man. I do feel like a man's love is a burning fire that does have to be fed. And it's interesting that you use the word fed because I think sometimes we live in this the society that subscribes to the notion of happy wife, happy life. And even prior to a marriage, I believe that is the thinking that if a man keeps his woman happy, that should be the source of his happiness. And I think sometimes we don't focus on meeting the needs of men because we feel like he should just do and do and do. And the
Right,
love we have, the respect we have for him is contingent upon what he provides.
right,
And there are a lot of us, I feel like, who are exhausting ourselves under the weight of not just providing, but longing to be loved,
right.
longing to be cared for, not taken care of, but to be cared for, right? And I think that all of us don't have the wherewithal to even express that because we feel like if we do, then we sound less than a
Yes,
man. What you think, bro?
you're absolutely right. So most times, most people think that men come fully equipped, with everything. But like I stated earlier, sometimes you have to feed the fire. The
Mm-hmm.
more you give to it, the more it burns. The more light that it sheds, the more
Mhm,
warmth that you get. Those
mhm,
the things that I don't think people realize that really men need to. The more you give to your man, the more he's able to do, the more you tend to your flame, the more that you get out of it. So
Mhm.
it's a simple, multiplication, one and one is one. But when you start multiplying, that's when things start to show up and things begin to
Mhm.
magnify and
That's
multiply.
right.
And that was one of our
Right.
first commandments: go forth and multiply.
Come on,
So
sir.
so that's my thing. I think multiplication is one of those things, man, that we need to really take a look at. The more you feed
Mhm.
the fire and the desire of the man, the more he wants to do for you.
Mhm. How do you think a man's love differs from a woman's love?
Oh man, a man will lay down his life for his
Mhm.
woman. It's one of those things where it's in him to do that, to lay down
Right.
his life for his woman. It's a regard in where he takes out his own well-being for the service of his woman and his family. You know what I mean? It's one
Yeah.
of those things that it's not a second thought. It's like,
Mhm.
it's natural for a man to do that, especially if they love him and they honor him and they respect him. He'll
Mhm.
do everything that he can. That is the main difference that I know, that I see between men and women. How men love, they're willing to do whatever. They'll climb whatever mountaintop they need to climb. They'll defend whoever they need to defend. You know what I mean? They'll protect and they'll give whatever it is it takes for them to give, to make
Mhm.
sure that he protects what is his. So I think that that is the major difference between the way a man loves and the way a woman loves. And it's two different ways. Not to say that one's better than the other, but
Right.
I'm just saying there is a difference.
I definitely would agree with that, man. I think that because we love differently, I find that oftentimes as men and women, we oftentimes will compete
Right.
about who really loves the deepest. I think sometimes as men, we get the short end of the stick because I think that our love is very much misunderstood. And I'm gonna tell you why I believe that, man. I think that because our love resembles the love of God, that is why it is so misunderstood sometimes. Because God loves unconditionally, and I always say that a person's father is your first encounter with God, right?
Absolutely.
Because God is our heavenly Father. I think that as a man begins to love his family, begins to love his woman in the beginning, that it's a love that may be misunderstood because in some ways you are afraid of it because you understand that unlike mama's love is gonna be a little more verbal, right? A little more hands-on. But with a father's love, a father sometimes allows you to figure things out. They will set an example, but they may not be there in terms of always hands-on, guiding you every step of the way in terms of saying turn left, turn right. It's really about you being in tune with the example that was set, that you can decipher for yourself which directions to go in life. I think sometimes because a father loves like that, because a father has to discipline, and even that looks different, right? That it's misunderstood. It's assumed that we are aggressive because when we discipline, it is aggressive, right?
Right.
If he speaks, the baritone in his voice can sound aggressive, but that is just the nature of who he is,
Right.
right? And I think sometimes because of all of these things, we misconstrue a man's love. We sometimes accuse him of, well, mama did this, you didn't. So her love is better. When studies show that if you remove the father from the family, that has the greater impact on the family. Just a man's presence. We don't even understand sometimes that sometimes his love is his presence. Because
Right.
while he sometimes remains silent on certain things, he is standing watch. His responsibility requires him to do things that nobody else would have to do. Standing watch and protecting you sometimes requires me to concentrate on what you cannot see. And sometimes his being quiet is actually him being watchful. but sometimes we misconstrue these things, man. Like, what do you think some common misconceptions about a man's love are?
Here's the thing. I think people think that a man's love is quiet,
Mhm.
and it's really not. The absence of sound is not quiet, you know. I'll give you an example. A mother's love is a love that pulls you in. It
Mhm.
swaddles you. You know what I mean? It comforts you. It's one of those things that's cozy and it's comforting. It's there to nurture you. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm. Mhm.
But a father's love is much different. A father's
Mhm.
love is more of a push than
Right.
it is a pull. A father will push you into the world to make sure that you understand exactly what your position is in the world,
Mhm.
to allow you to subdue the world. That's one of the things that God taught Adam. He said, "Go forth and subdue." You know what I mean? Well,
Love that.
learn your position in life. Learn everything there's to learn. It is more of a wisdom based, fact based, type of nurturing. It's
Mhm.
like, come with me and let me show you the world. It's one of those type of things.
Mhm.
It's one of those things where it's a rites of passage, so to speak.
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but most fathers, when they have a son or a daughter,
Yeah.
if they're a teacher, that is the greatest thing that a man can do. You know,
Right.
he takes them from the comfort of the mother and then says, "Hey, come with me and let me show you the world." And I think one of those things is if you have a child
Mhm.
who is never gone out into the world with the father in
Yeah.
the safety and the presence of the father while you learn, which is the difference.
Mhm.
There's a safety and presence with mother where she protects you from the world, but the
Mhm.
father allows you to go into the world with his protection,
Mhm.
but also he gives you the freedom, to fail, the freedom to learn from your mistakes. It's a certain type of freedom that he gives, but he also
Mhm.
is there to protect. That's why he says, "I will never leave you nor
Mhm.
forsake you." And
Mhm.
that's one of those things I think people don't understand the magnitude and the gravity of a father. He allows you to spread your wings. He allows you to
Right.
be the greatest form of yourself. And I think that is the major difference or misconception between how men love and how women love. The father is very important because he allows the growth to take place.
Mhm. I think that the another common misconception is that men do not understand commitment. And I
Right,
think that is based upon the fact that we are not as quick to give our romantic love as the woman is. But I think oftentimes we don't understand how men and women are raised different. We condition women from day one to grow up and encounter a man who treats you well, will be a gentleman, and who will demonstrate an interest in you, to provide for you, to take care of you. You marry this man, live happily ever after. There's nothing wrong with that. But we do not condition men the same way, right?
right,
We do teach them skills, right? We do show them things about manhood, but we don't necessarily, as little boys, talk to them about marriage, right?
right,
About growing up and settling down, right? And I feel that may be um, a change that needs to happen in the next generation. But I feel like because a man does not give his eros, his romantic love away very quickly, that we assume the man does not understand commitment. But what I have come to realize as a man is that we actually do understand the love that we have to give. We actually understand how sensitive we can be. And because we know that should we happen to fall in love, should we happen to meet somebody that we want to give that love to, we understand how powerful she will be in our life because she will be our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We know that. We also understand there's a level of vulnerability that comes along with that, that we are not always ready at this stage to take. But we also, even when she is the right woman, it is still sometimes hard for us to exist in that space of vulnerability. Because why? We were taught to lock that away a long time ago. We were taught not to be sensitive, not to be vulnerable, not to express those emotions that we think are weak, right? But the reality is, like you and I know as grown men now, that real men express themselves. But for a man to come to that point of understanding, that is sometimes a difficult task. And we judge some men who are not in that place yet. And we make them feel like less than who they really are. Because we are saying that if you can't be this, if you can't do this, then you don't understand commitment. But the truth of the matter is this: a man has already committed prior to him actually using those words. Because if we meet a woman and she hits us in that place that nobody has ever hit us, when she speaks to the king in us, when we start willingly providing for her, protecting her for her, professing our love, right? Even in small, subtle ways. It might not be an I love you yet, but it may be things like, I really enjoy spending time with you. Nobody makes me feel like you do. Nobody's ever spoken to me that way. That's a man telling you that he loves you before he actually says, I love you. But sometimes we do not give a man the space or the grace to grow to communicating that because we don't understand his journey to right now. What do you think, bro?
You're absolutely correct. There's levels to love, and it's powerful. It's like
Yeah.
we discussed about it earlier about the flame. When you first meet somebody, it's a
Hmm.
kindling. But as you grow and get to know someone, that vulnerability has to take place for it to activate your full love for a woman. And I'll give
Yeah.
you an example. Most
Hmm.
men will love a woman to a certain point because he doesn't want her to see him as less than as a man. But
Right.
what men don't fully realize is that in order for you to activate the fullness of your manhood,
Hmm.
there is a certain level of vulnerability you're going to have to give up. And the
Say
problem
that,
with
sir.
that is most men don't allow themselves to get that point because they would fear that she would no
Hmm.
longer love who he really is. You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And what happens is, in order for you to reach that level of love, you have to be able to show this person who you are and give them the option to say, I
Hmm.
will love you anyway, no
Hmm.
matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter how bad you think you are, I'm going to love you anyway. That is a
Hmm.
place where God resides, because
Yeah.
God loves us anyway. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
when you get to that particular point in love, that is where joy is birthed. When
Yes, sir.
you get married between the person who loves you anyway, even though
Hmm.
you're not the most loving person today,
Hmm.
even though sometimes you may have forgotten an anniversary or forgotten to take the trash out
Now
or
in
something like that.
Birmingham, there will be showers with a high of
It's one of those
67
things,
degrees
man.
Fahrenheit.
It's one of those things, man, where you have to make sure that you get to that point. Because if you
Yeah.
don't get to that point, then the real love is not activated. So it's the vulnerability portion that we have to reach to. But until you actually get to that point,
Hmm.
it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
I
You'll
definitely
be
agree.
you'll be walking around with a counterfeit love. It's shiny and gold, like gold. But can you spend it? Can
Yeah.
you rightly divine it? It's one of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. I think, to a certain extent, a man is afraid to fall in love, but not how we think. I
Mm.
also think a man has is afraid of his woman to a certain extent, right? What I mean, when a man really loves his woman, he understands that what I will do anything to protect her. He doesn't even really want her around a lot of men in an intimate way because he views her as his. because
That's right.
we are territorial. And when a man really loves his woman, he is afraid to lose that woman. He is afraid of how vulnerable that he is becoming and will become because he understands with each passing day, I love this woman more and more each day. And while we are glad she is in our life, on the other side of that, we are so afraid of losing something that we have never had. That sometimes, I believe, gets the best of some men. And it causes us to act out sometimes when we don't really mean it. And it may be acting out even towards our woman sometime because we have never been in this space. We know who we're becoming. Part of us is afraid, and then the other part of us is upset. We're upset with ourselves for getting to this point, but part of us is saying, but she's good for you. And we know this, but we realize she's causing us to have to deal with certain emotions that we are not accustomed to dealing with. We know we have emotions, but we're not accustomed to dealing with those emotions that are classified as feminine energy, vulnerability, sensitivity. We are not accustomed to dealing with that. So to have to now be truthful with those emotions, to not have to deal with people saying, JB, man, you changing, man. You used to wouldn't tolerate that. You used to would respond different, right? And
Right.
although the different is better in your head, you're changing and you're becoming a man that you never thought you would be, but you're a better man. But sometimes we again are afraid of losing our identity because we are so accustomed to being so aggressive. We are so accustomed to being the old version of who we are. And that is the one that everyone is afraid of. But now, this new version of you, which is better, people embrace that version of you. They love that version of you. But in our head, we're losing our edge. And if we're not careful, there are some times when we will go overboard and revert back to who we used to be because we are afraid of what this woman is leading us into. So there are some levels in relationships where we have to follow her lead. Doesn't mean that we're not the leader, but there are times where she can help us navigate in a space she is accustomed to. We're not. What do you think?
You're absolutely right. I'll give you an example of
Mhm.
where that has taken place. I don't know if you remember the movie 300
Yeah,
before
yeah.
Leonidas, kicked one of the guys down the hole.
Mhm,
He looked over
mhm.
to his woman and she gave him the eye and said, I have
Right.
your full support. She didn't have to say nothing. She knew exactly what she needed to say with one look to her man.
Yeah,
He knew exactly what that meant. And
yeah,
that activated the Spartan warrior in him. He
yeah.
was already a leader. He was
Right.
already a king. He just looked and say, look, I'm going to lay down my life for my country. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Do I have your back? With one look. And she said, yes. And after that, it was on and popping.
It was over.
She knew the power in the queen
Yeah,
was there for a reason. You know what I mean? Because he
yeah.
understood the type of woman that he had.
Right, right.
She at that particular point in time knew the value that, in order for him to be the king that he needs to be fearless. You can't
Mhm.
hide in the corner and protect her. You're the king, you have to be out in front. You have to be the example. And it was that one look that she gave him, only because that the intimacy that they shared.
Mhm.
And at that point, she was a leader in that position, but he still was the leader of that country, you know.
Mhm.
But in order for him to do that, he had to have the buy-in. So it's one of those things. To tell you the truth, he already made up in his mind what he wanted to do. He
Right,
just wanted to get the blessing,
right,
so to speak,
right,
from his woman.
right.
But men are very vulnerable. And here's the thing about it, what you spoke to earlier. You
Mhm.
said that a lot of times people get into relationships and they say that I'm losing who I am. Well,
Mhm.
that's the whole purpose. You're
That's
supposed to
right.
lose who you are, because the new person that you're becoming is going to be the person you need to become for the mission at hand, for the new mission at hand.
Mhm.
As a rough and tumble man, in order for you to communicate with your wife, sometimes you may need to be soft so she can hear what you're saying. You
Mhm.
know, you're going to have to be able to communicate her with her on a level that she can understand. It may
Right.
not be a situation where she understands your gruffness, but
Mhm.
my thing is this: if you give her a little bit of what she's used to, she'll
Right.
trust you a little bit more. And safety and intimacy and security is one of those things that women crave. And I
Mhm.
think that being who we used to be is not going to serve us who we need to be going forward,
Right.
especially if we're going to be married. You're going to have to
That's right.
shed who you used to be to become who you need to be so you
That's right.
can go where you need to be.
That's right. I always say, JB, that love is learning. And in this journey of love, we have to be prepared to learn from each other. And it takes a mature man and a mature woman to humble themselves and even submit in certain instances to each other to learn from them, right? You know,
Absolutely.
take for instance, we mentioned a minute ago about as men, we don't always have the experience in regard to intimacy and sensitivity and vulnerability, right? I think that all of us as men at the core, we desire intimacy, but we have been taught that the only avenue to intimacy is sex. That is why a lot of men are so for sex. They're really craving intimacy and they don't know another way to get it. The right woman can tame that part of a man and teach him how to appreciate who she is as a woman by being a soft woman. And I think a lot of women don't understand the power of their softness, that feminine touch, right? They don't realize that beauty can tame this beast when she understands who she is as a queen, when she understands her worth herself, her value herself, when she exists inside of her own standards, when she is high hanging fruit and she presents herself to be just that, and when she has no compromise, it shows this potential man is coming to her life that she is on this level here and she is not coming down no matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter how smooth you speak. When men encounter a woman like that, it teaches this man how to slow down and appreciate the virtue and the value of a woman because now you can see not simply her wrapping paper, but the gift inside is what you examine now. And when a man really understands the gift that's inside of this beautiful wrapping paper, that is what makes a man, in my opinion, love. Is that when he gets down and he sees this woman's soul, when he stops trying to see how she looks in those jeans and he asks himself, how does she look in my life? When he reaches that point, that's when this man begins to really love. He sees a soul, a beautiful soul, flaws and all, and he wants to love and protect that soul. And in turn, we know that a like minded woman will reciprocate that, a like minded woman. It is
That's right.
not automatic. I think the mistake that we make is that we were having a conversation earlier today in another group about the whole happy, happy wife, happy life concept. And while I understand the notion, right? And I don't totally disagree with the notion. It's the statement I don't like because it's selfish in nature because it says to this man, the love that you get back is contingent upon what you provide. When if we are married, if we are one, all of our communication about who we are needs to be oneness. So therefore, what we do for one another needs to be because I desire to serve you as a man, as a woman. I desire to serve my partner. What I do is I want to do this. I have a will to do this. No matter what they do, I will do. We lose sight of that, man, because we're so selfish in what we will do and won't do that we approach relationships sometimes and already say, I'm not going to do this. I refuse to do this. When we don't realize that evolving in a relationship requires me to pay attention throughout. I can't love you in year one how I do in year five because you've got some different things you're going to need in year 5, 6, and 7. I have to pay attention and study you to realize who you are in this season. It might even be not that long. What about 6 months? Something might happen in a 6-month time frame that requires you to need from me something different than you needed 6 months ago. But have I paid attention? Am I present to understand the change that you've experienced, whether it's a hormonal change, societal change, physical change, psychological change? I think that in itself, coming to you next, psychological changes. How do you think that affects the way that a man loves?
You know what? That is a great question. I'll explain to you like this. Yesterday, we had a revelation. It's
Hmm.
about what you said earlier, about how men and women use their sexuality to
Hmm.
express their masculinity or
Hmm.
femininity. When
Hmm.
sexuality is neither feminine nor masculine, it's just a
Come
tool.
on.
And
That's right.
whichever person who happens to have it happens to use it. The
Hmm.
problem is when we use it in the wrong way, we identify, your sexuality as your masculinity when it's not.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Your masculinity has absolutely nothing to do with your sexuality.
That's right.
Masculinity is something that wants to protect.
Right.
Masculinity is one of those things that wants to teach. Masculinity is one of those things that garners wisdom and shares. You know what I mean? Masculinity does things for you without you asking. Those are the type of thing.
Mhm.
And I think what happens is we use those things in the wrong context. It's the same way with a woman. She may use her sexuality thinking that's her femininity when it's not.
Mhm.
Her femininity is a soft place for him to lay his head. Her
Mhm.
femininity is a listening ear when he has something to say.
Mhm.
Femininity is comforting. Femininity is one of those things that looks forward to wanting to serve her man. You see what I'm saying? Those things. And I think what happens is in today's age and time, we like to equivalate masculinity and femininity as interchangeably as sexuality when it's not the thing. See,
Right.
Greg, we live in a microwave society where we
Let's
want to
talk
speed
about
up
it.
the process.
Mhm.
Sexuality is like that gas burner knob that's on your stove. You
Mhm.
want to speed things up. You just turn it all the way up and you burn up your food. You know what I'm saying? But that's
Yes,
not
sir.
how intimacy works. Intimacy is a slow simmer. You see what I'm saying?
Come on,
That's the
slow
reason
simmer.
why when grandmother cooked, she cooked all day. And she used
Yes,
to have
sir.
that thing on low, you know what I mean, to make sure that the
Mhm.
love that she poured into the food, you felt it when you ate it. You see what I'm saying? It was a
Mhm.
different type of thing. And I think what happens in today's love, we try to manufacture
Yeah.
connection by expressing sexuality when that's not the case, you
Yeah.
know? And what happens
Yeah.
is once you do that, you get a relationship that's burnt on the outside and raw on the inside. You see what I'm
I will.
saying? It's not done all the way through. There used to be a saying, I think I forgot who said it, but she said she had to learn her man as she earned her man. You see what I'm saying?
Come on.
And we don't spend enough time getting to know each other anymore. It's like, hey, I like you, I like you. Let's do this. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, hey, what's important to you? That's a slow
Mhm,
simmer. You know what I mean?
mhm,
What do you see yourself in 5 years? Do you like kids? What do you enjoy about having kids? Do you enjoy teaching? Those type of things. How do you release steam? Do you educate yourself from time to time? What do you enjoy? What are some of the things you would like to see in the world? That is a slow simmer because it allows you to paint a picture inside the mind and the direction of your relationship. You see what I'm saying?
I
Instead of
see
just
it.
saying, hey, let's go to the restaurant and get this over with. That's you're burning the
Mhm,
food up, you're burning up your relationship, you're cooking it too fast. You see what I'm
mhm.
saying? So the problem is we want to psychologically get to a place, but we don't want to slow down enough to really get to know somebody. Believe it or not, that is exactly the reason why most relationships after a certain decade just seems to last longer. It
Yeah,
seems like the longer that your grandmama cooked the food, the longer that your relationship lasted. You see what I'm saying? And as if you go forward up in time, you see your mama used to cook, and then that marriage lasts a little while. You know what I mean? And
yes,
now we
sir.
get today, it's 3 minutes, popcorn, you know what I'm saying, in the microwave, and that's
Yeah,
it. And the
yeah,
relationship is over with by the end of the night. So it's
yeah.
one of those things, man, that I think we really need to take time out to be vulnerable, not juggle so many
Mhm.
different people. If you're married, slow down. Last night we talked about intimacy between a husband and a wife and
Yes,
not
sir.
rushing into the good part, taking
Yeah.
time out to enjoy each other's company, hold each other,
Mhm,
cuddle each other without, escalating. You know what I'm saying?
mhm, mhm,
Those types of
mhm.
things. And I think what happens is that is where the slow simmer is made. That is where the bond is created. That's the psychological portion of relationships that we take for granted today. We don't slow some anymore. We just want to hit the button and go to microwave and go to 10. It's not how that works. You have to
Come
make
on,
sure you
man.
take your time. Put it in the crock pot and let it cook all day.
Come on. Come on now.
Send her a
My
message from time
man
to time
said,
and say, hey, listen, I was
yes,
thinking
sir.
about you today, baby. You know what I'm
Come
saying?
on.
That type of thing. That's what you need. Tell her how you
Yes,
miss her,
sir. Yes, sir.
grab her by the waist and say, you know what, you the best thing that
Come
ever
on.
happened to me. You know what I mean? That type of thing. Come on, man.
Yes.
That's the slow simmer. But a lot of times we don't do that, man. We don't do that. So it's one of those things where we have to get back to learning how to love the right way,
Yeah,
for real. Instead of learning from a selfish point of view where we
yeah.
get what we want to get and just forget all about the other person. Love is not like that at all. Love reaches in and finds out what the other person needs and gives it to them. And if you find the right person, they'll be able to reciprocate. And your both of your wells will never run dry.
Come on now. Listen, if I could flip to the book of R&B, chapter, uh,
Come
Babyface
on
saying,
now.
I only think of you on two occasions.
That's right.
That's day and night.
Day and night.
That's what he's saying. I think you, brother. And I think that if you look, and this may be a reach, but if you look at the shift in the relationships over the last, I'm gonna say 20 years, it mirrors the shift in music.
Right.
We don't write songs nowadays often about love, it's just about sex.
Correct.
Right? We don't write those songs that suggest even what you said about calling her just randomly and telling her you miss her, how you feel. And I bring that up because there was a time, JB, when even those of us who didn't have game, we understood who to let speak for us,
That's right.
right? If you was lucky enough to get that phone number, right, at that school dance, you just happened to catch her at the right time. You can never talk to her in school, but something about those dim lights, brought you two together. You get that phone number and you don't have no game. Now you done got home and you got a caller now. You don't know what to say. You could always recall that you had made you a slow jam tape.
That's right. That's right.
We ain't had no CD, and we ain't had no money. But we had a boom box with a black and a red button. We would record the Quiet Storm. You understand what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes.
And you knew, let me call, the girl that was Bernadette. You call on the phone and you ask to speak to her. This is me. I just want to play something for you. And you would let Luther do your talking.
That's
He'd be
right.
like, let me hold you tight, if only for one night.
That's right.
Right? Or you would let High Five do your talking all summer long. We've been together. And I never felt so good. We knew who to let speak for us, but eventually we got the nerve up ourselves to learn how to communicate what these songs were saying. I'm just a firm believer that music has an impact on all of our psyche on some level.
It does.
And the reality is, I think that because you think about all of us been to parties. Look how music impacts women on the dance floor. How they dance, if they'll dance, who they'll dance with, right? As men, when the words of those songs sometimes come from our lips, but in our thoughts, this sometimes creates the same type of reaction.
That's right.
Over time, I think we have forgotten how to genuinely express ourselves to our woman because we thought, or we think rather, that it's not worth it because she does not respond to that. Now, it is true. Some don't. I think some don't because they think we won't do it. So
Correct.
when it's done, it's odd. Oh, it's like, oh, why he did it? He was a gentleman. He did know what to say. I think that men and women have lost sight of not just who each other is, but we have lost sight of who we really are.
Absolutely.
That we stop being moved by what actually moves us. Right? It's happening on the inside, but we won't let this show on the outside because we have become numb to certain things. We have shut ourselves off from certain emotions, maybe due to heartbreak, maybe it was hurt, a failed relationship, maybe we don't want to love again, right? For whatever the reason is, whether you are a man or a woman. So now we're in this space, in this place now of where we're uncertain if we want to love again, if we can love again, if my heart can take this again. Because I mean, a bad breakup, no matter what age you are, can be devastating. And there are some people who have reached the point of where they really don't know if they can actually go through this again. And they are not afraid of new love, but they are afraid of old pain. So before they go down this avenue again, they freeze. We call it pulling back. They're freezing. It's not you, it's them. Sometimes when you really, really like somebody and can see yourself loving that person, you freeze because whoever loves you, I'm sorry, whoever you love can hurt you. And that is what we're trying to avoid is being hurt again. We don't realize this love requires us to take a chance. Let me go here with men. Come back to you. This whole heartbreak thing, right? That men experience with women. A lot of time, our response to that heartbreak has nothing to do with that woman, but everything to do with something that happened in childhood. And this heartbreak now takes me back to an insecure little boy that's been screaming out but I have learned how to keep them in a cage because I don't know how to heal them. So I've become this different version of a man to what I consider to be strong. But the reality is, I tried to be strong as a young boy, and strong boys oftentimes make fragile men. I'm heartbroken now, and I can see myself shattering and becoming fragile. And now my inner child, all of a sudden, is exposed now. How do men deal with that?
You know what? The hard part about that is that we don't realize exactly how to handle that. I'm going to give you an example. Just like you said, when that little boy got turned down for the first time in kindergarten,
Mhm,
he remembered how devastating it was because his mom told him that
mhm.
women are made from sugar and spice and everything nice.
Very
You know what I
nice.
mean? He could have swore that women were made from sugar and spice and everything nice. Everything that people told him was that women were made from sugar and spice and everything nice. His whole world was built around sugar and spice and everything nice. And
Mhm,
that moment that that girl crushed his world, it stuck with him. So what happens is that he grows up, and every time he has heartbreak, he builds up what's known as a callus over his
right.
heart. You know, in certain cases, calluses are good for you in your hands. You know, when you chopping down wood, you know, with an axe or something like that, you build up those calluses so you can tote that heavy load. But the heart is not a place for a callus to be. You know what I mean?
That's right.
If you have a calloused heart, it won't allow real love to enter in when it needs to. When you
Mhm,
find that woman that really loves you, you don't
mhm,
open up properly because you have that callous on your heart. And what happens is men have to learn how to love themselves and forgive themselves for
mhm.
things that other people did to them. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? And
I
not
do.
have that callous built up over their heart, and that allows them to love the woman who really needs to love them. So
Mhm,
disappointment is one of those things that men use as a teaching tool to build up that callus. But over time, it could get so thick where you become jaded and say, "Not me." You know, I'll never have kids, or I'll never be married. You know, that type of thing. And then the world doesn't look as brightly colored as it used to. You know what I mean? You don't get the motivation like you used to. But the thing about it is sometimes you have to reach deep down inside and grab your own joy. You see what I'm saying? And then
yeah.
once you build that joy is developed where you can share it with somebody else. And then that way you'll have it to pour into someone else and they
Mhm,
enjoy your joy. And then you'll be able to share joy. You'll have something to pour into the other person. You know what I'm saying? So that's the
absolutely.
main reason why we as men are very guarded about who we love. We're very picky about who we let in, you know, because we remember that first little girl in kindergarten who was supposed to be sugar and spice and everything nice. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it didn't turn out that way, but it's
Right.
the callus on our hearts that we
Mhm,
have to remove as we get older that
mhm,
allow us to be the men that we need to be and to love the way that we need to love. Could you
mhm.
imagine if God had a callus on his heart
Lord have
and
mercy.
saw fit not to redeem us,
Ooh.
to have Jesus to die on the cross to not redeem us, not to
Mhm,
save us? You see what I'm saying?
mhm,
Could you
mhm,
imagine? Thank God for his example. Thank God for
mhm.
his wisdom. And thank God for his love. And I think that's the example I think all men is missing today. They're missing that love that Jesus displayed, that
Yeah.
God has for us. You know, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. You know,
Yes,
he
sir.
gave. That's real love. When you give, when you pour out, when you give your all, your last. You see what I'm saying? And I
Mhm.
think we as men need to get back to that. You know, forgive yourself, forgive yourself, you know, and love others, even though they may not want to love you or they may not be further along in the love development. But as
Yeah.
long as you stay the course and other people seeing you not being afraid to love, then it allows other people the permission to love as well. Sometimes we're the example, man, that people need to see.
That's right.
You know, as men, we have to be able to not be afraid, to stay the course, to be the example. because other men are watching. They just want to know if it's okay too. You ever remember back in the day when you used to slow dance, man? And
Come
every
on.
time the fast music would stop and the DJ would be like, now it's that time of the evening. So grab your
Yes, sir.
special lady, and you didn't want to be the guy that didn't have a
All
woman.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
All
Because
right.
it was like, oh, well, you didn't get a lady, you didn't get one. You know what I'm saying? That type of thing. So we would razz each other, but in order for you to do that, people need to see that it's okay to love. You know. But now people don't dance no more. This it's like the
Right.
slow jam music come on, the dance floor clear out. Don't nobody
Okay.
want to be vulnerable no more. But I
Hmm.
remember back in the day, the slow jam was the best part
Come
of the
on now.
evening. You see what I'm
You
saying?
better
That was
know it.
when you get to get close and hold it tight. You know what I'm saying? And listen to the music and let the DJ play what's on your mind, and you just sit there and just
Mhm,
wonder and think. So that's just
mhm.
one of the things I think, man. I think we need to the men need to be the example of what love really is. You know, make sure that we show the example of what God is through us. And I think the world would be a better place if we started there.
So we have a comment I want to address. It says, it's impossible to love healthy when your heart is full of wounds.
Ooh, that's so
Now, I could
good.
definitely, yeah, it is.
That's so
I could
good.
definitely understand how one could come to that conclusion. And I even empathize uh, with one who has that perspective and has been hurt. I would say this: sometimes we have to realize that we are allowed to experience hurt that we can understand and appreciate healing. Like when you look at Jesus on the cross, who experienced just about every kind of human emotion on the cross, and even in his life, and how he handled how he felt being 100% man and 100% God, having to subdue his divinity and operate in his humanity, having to ask God the Father to forgive those who were persecuting him in the midst of being persecuted. So, in other words, Jesus showed us how to serve when he himself needed to be served. He showed us how to love in the midst of being hated. Now, one would argue, well, we're not Christ. I'll give you that. But if my goal is to be Christ like, I cannot say that I do not have an example of what to do in the face of adversity, what to do when I feel like people are attacking me, what to do when I'm faced with the attacks of the same individuals that I have wiped their tears. Like love is wiping the tears of people who walked away from you when you were dying on the cross for things that they did.
My God.
That is what love is. Love is about unreservedly giving of myself for someone else's benefit, no matter what you do. Now, if the question is, how do I love when I'm wounded? I have to ask myself what I need. Sometimes you learn what to do by realizing what was not done for you. When I realized there's some who did not have a mother or a father, right? So they did not experience that type of love, but they know what they would have wanted to have received from their mother or their father. And that sometimes becomes, as JB said earlier, the burning fire that creates a sense in me to be what I'm not supposed to know how to be. Because I've learned how to look at my own life and say, what do I need? What did I need? What did I not receive? You know what? I'm going to give that thing because whatever you give will one day come back to you because you reap what you sow. That could be negative and positive. And I think that as we understand what healing really is, there's a thing we'll understand that help us realize that there is a hurt that heals, because sometimes the wounds that I am receiving or have received gives me a greater appreciation when something different comes into my life. And I'm a believer that even in the midst of receiving unjust treatment, there's always some people that God have in our life on some capacity that give us what we need. Because if there were not, we would not be able to make it. And if God says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you, he was not talking to just believers. It was everybody. Even those who don't believe, they're blessed also. Let me prove it to you in scripture. The man who sat by the pool of Bethesda for 38 years, waiting for the water to be stirred. Jesus one day comes up, asks the man, do you want to be healed? The man gives him an excuse, and he says, I have nobody to push me in the water. That automatically demonstrates to us this man had no faith in God at all. Because he is saying, I have nobody to push me in that physical water when he's got living water standing in front of him. Nowhere in the text do you read that this man believed in God. Nowhere do you read that. Nowhere. Nowhere do you read that this man's miracle ultimately of being healed was a result of his faith. It was not. Jesus just decided, I feel like blessing you. And that is really the root of where blessings come from. God just feel like blessing you. You can't make God act. Yes, if you have faith, all things are possible. But guess what? When you don't have faith, God could still decide to bless you. Because all of us have moments of doubt. We have moments of being weary and worry. So even if we're somebody that needs to be healed and have not been healed yet, I believe we still have a love on the inside of us that we're waiting to give somebody, because we're waiting now for that love to come into us from somebody else. And especially when we allow God to be that for us, it definitely shows us that we're worth it, we're worthy, and that we do have something on the inside of us that can bless and strengthen somebody else's life. On you, JB.
Thank you. You know what? I think we need to take a step back and understand exactly the reason why God does what he does and how we can appreciate the season that we're in and don't miss the lesson and the blessing. You see what I'm saying? I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. When I played football, when I was in high school, you know, when it was hot outside, you know, we were
Mhm.
sweating, you know what I mean? We were tired. And when we got out of football practice, there used to be this guy named Fred that used to sell these juices in this ice cold barrel full of ice. And we used to get that juice. And I tell you something, that juice tastes way better on a hot summer day. You know, when the sun beat down on me, I really could appreciate that juice because of the environment and the
Yeah.
conditions that I was in. I'll give you an example. You don't appreciate an ice cream cone in the middle of the wintertime, now do you?
Uh,
You see what I'm saying? Sometimes it's the season that you're in that allows you to appreciate what you're going to be enjoying in the next season. You know what I mean? Your harvest doesn't always come the season that you planted. You see what I'm saying?
yeah.
In due time, that's when you reap, when it's time, when you sow when it's time to reap, you know? It's one of those things where you appreciate things a little bit more once you've been through some things. Hey, Greg, have you been to a wedding and
Mhm.
all of a sudden the groom is having tears
Yes,
pouring
sir.
down his eyes? You see what I'm
Kids.
saying? Because he knows what a prize he has had. You don't know the type
Mhm.
of things he had to go through, the type of heartbreak he had to go. And here comes his bride, the person
Mhm.
who's going to be comforting him for the rest of his life. The
Mhm.
good thing that God promised him while he was in the shadow You know what I'm saying? The valley of the shadows of death. We don't know what type of relationships that man had before he met that woman, but
Right.
those tears told it all. You see what I'm
Yes,
saying?
sir.
So
Yes,
I
sir.
will tell anybody, man, in the midst of whatever you're going through in your season, where it may seem like things are tough and rough, just know when it's your time, that joy that you're going to feel, it's going to be worth it. It really
Mm,
is. You know how I know? Because every time I've been through something and
yes,
God
sir.
pulled me out of it, I was like, Lord, I appreciate you.
Yeah.
I really do. Because I thought you forgot about me for a minute. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, but you know what?
Mm,
Every time I look back on that situation, he's always been there. He's always walked me through that. And I think people lose sight of that sometimes.
mhm.
You know, God has always been there. You know, even though you look back, you only see one set of footprints. That's when you knew that he carried you. You know,
Hey.
you knew he carried you because you didn't carry yourself.
Yes,
He's
sir.
always been there. So, like I say, you have to appreciate what you're going through, the good and the bad. You know,
Mm,
sometimes you have to have the rain and the sunshine. You know, that's what makes the flowers bloom. You know, that's what
mm,
the bees come out. You know, to make sure they get what the flowers have, so that we can give the things that we give. You know, to have the fruits. You know, of the labor. Sometimes bees do things that we don't think about, but in order for
that's
us to
right.
happen, the grass must grow. You know, the flowers must bloom. You know,
Yeah.
and that's what makes the world a better place. You know, you have to have a little rain. You know, every
Mm,
day ain't gonna be sunshine. Could you imagine if every day was sunshine? You wouldn't be able to appreciate the rain. You
that's
wouldn't.
right.
You wouldn't have the harvest that you're supposed to have if everything be burned up. That's why we have seasons, because it's time that the ground needs to rest. You know, and I think sometimes in our lives we don't understand that there are certain seasons that we have to rest. You know, and sometimes you have to take time out for yourself and get with God. You know,
Yeah.
get replenished, get that joy back in your heart. You know,
Hmm.
read something, read the Bible, you know, build yourself up so that way you have something to pour in, gather wisdom, you know, gather nurturing, you know, gather those things that allow you to make somebody else's life, because you never know.
That's right.
You may be that very person that pours into somebody in a season where they think that nobody was there for them. So remember that.
Mhm.
Remember that.
Amen. You know, as always, this has been a very enlightening conversation. I'm definitely me and myself and JB are going to hope that the other brothers are available next week so we can get us all on here and continue this conversation about when a man loves a woman. Here are my final thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. I always say that loving a woman is like taking care of a rose. If you look at a rose, it is beautiful. But if you look closer, you will see the thorns on the rose. So if you hold a woman wrong, you'll get cut. The same way holding a rose wrong, you'll get cut. But if you nurture that rose, and if you put that rose in some soil, it'll grow you a whole garden. Likewise, when you love a woman right, and when you plant her in the soul of your being, and when you allow her to be your helpmeet, and when you pledge your life to her, she'll grow a garden in your life. And then you even grow to realize that on a physical rose, what we see as thorns are just hardened leaf stems. And it's where over time, as it's rained, the rain has turned those leaf stems into hard places that form a thorn. That sometimes as men, we have to realize that as we love our woman, we have to hold her in a manner where we make her know that we're going to even secure the rough places of her life. And we understand what she has been through, and we will not judge her because of certain things that we wish were different based upon some negative experiences that she's had. If she's going to be our queen, she has to be our queen no matter what. You have to love the bloom, you have to love the root, and you have to also love her, the hardened leaf stems, because sooner or later, you won't even notice them. Because the love that you're giving her will make her forget that her heart was ever broken. Next week, same time, same channel. We'll see you here on the Vision Radio on the Sanctuary Podcast every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I love you with the love of the Lord. Thank you so much, JB, my brother, always.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, I love you all as well, and we will see you next time.